Hello everybody, Organization and Management of Early Childhood Education Programs. Under this, today we are going to deal with the topic Personal Management of Early Childhood Education Programs. The objective of this lesson is to understand the personal management of early childhood education programs. The first 6 to 8 years of life is globally acknowledged to be the most critical years for the lifelong development because the pace of development in these years is extremely rapid. Even the research in the fields of neuroscience, particularly on the brain, has provided a convincing evidences of the critical periods located within these years for forming the connections in the brain and the full development of brain's potential. The research also indicates that these early years are not supported or embedded in a stimulating, enriching physical and psychosocial environment. The chances for the child's brain developing to its full potential are considerably and often irreversibly reduced. This is a stage in the life so important as the foundation for inculcation of social values and personal habits which are known for lifetime. Because of this much as importance is given during these years, the early childhood education is also considered very important for development of the child in a holistic way. The early childhood education will provide with the knowledge and skills for the whole development of the child. In the early childhood education center, the teacher is the prime most important for the children. The early childhood education will have the teachers who should have a foundational knowledge, skills, experiences necessary so that they can take care of the children and help them in their full potential growth and development. The teacher should have a knowledge of various programs available and address the needs of the young children and their families. And they should have assessed their suitability in working in early childhood education centers. So, not only this, the teacher should also have the skills of communication, leadership, management and thinking process. This is the reason why the personnel in the early childhood education centers are very important. A quality of services in the early childhood education requires not only good educators, but more importantly a good administration system that can recruit and retain these educators to maintain a high quality of staff. The staff qualification and continuity are central to a high quality provision, and this is the case in any early childhood educational centers or institutions, which would benefit directly to the children who are attending the services. Yet, sometimes the staff in the early childhood education centers, including the early childhood teachers, has become a great problem. In order to have more qualified and continued staff at early childhood education centers, a more systematic and strategic staffing policies and procedures should be developed. Let us see what we mean by staffing. Staffing is the process of recruiting and dealing with human resources required to perform the functions of the center. People are the human resources that hold the key to meeting the goals of an organization such as the Child Developmental Center or the Early Childhood Education Center. Many non-human resources like the facilities, equipment, supplies, these all stand idle and are ineffectively used without the skilled people who can put them into proper use. People's knowledge, their skills, abilities, stamina, enthusiasm and love are the aspects of the human energy. What is the director's role in staffing? The director role in staffing is choosing the staff to implement the goals outlined for the center. The responsibility of the director includes locating the people who can best perform the required task, encouraging creative performance and cooperative effort, removing any road blocking the or hindering the success. Monitoring the performance to assure high quality services that parents, children and the society deserves. After having understood what is the job responsibility of director in staff recruitment, we will see what are the job descriptions. A clear definition of the role of each staff member should be given. Each role requires a thorough description. A well-defined job description provides a framework within which an individual can function creatively the task required for the program. Job descriptions should be viewed regularly to determine whether some changes are necessary or not. Job description usually include the job title, the person to whom responsible, the people for whom the staff is responsible, the qualifications like the educational qualification, the experience, personal health and physical abilities, the duties and responsibilities of the staff, the salary schedule, the work schedule, all these include under the job description. So, after having understood why the personnel in educational of early childhood is important, let us now move on to see what is staff and how it can be recruited. According to Heathfield, recruitment is a process of finding candidates, reviewing their credentials, screening potential employees and selecting employees for an organization. The staff recruitment in early childhood setting is not only about choosing the most suitable applicant, but is also a reflection of the center's operational situation and a decisive step for the future development. A poor recruitment could result in higher rates of turnover, reduced performance or effectiveness and low job satisfaction and reduced work motivation. So, the applicant's recruitment experience with the center can also impact the likelihood of whether he or she will accept the offer and stay in the service. The staff recruitment can be a very complex task and an intentional leaders approach the staffing matters systematically and strategically. Therefore, thoughtful upfront plan and selection process can ensure the best possible process to be followed for both the provider and also the applicant. When hiring a new employees for the work, there are several things that should be taken care. That is, knowing the law and think about the hiring. Regarding the work hours, thought should be given for the work arrangements, for the leave, which can be a parental leave or annual leave or personal carer leave. And also you should take into consideration the community service leave along with the public holidays, etc. Before hiring the staff, a leader must familiarize himself or herself of any update on the relevant legislations regarding the employee's right. And then when the needs of the new staff occurs, a leader should assess the needs, then see whether the needs have to be fulfilled by the hiring a new person or can it be met by training of the current employee who is already present in the organization. Once the job descriptions are ready, the major hiring process begins. Each center follows an established and some follow general procedures regarding the hiring process. The first is like the advertising, interviewing and selecting the employees. Let us see what are the effective hiring procedures. Advertising process, a form of job description. When the vacancy occurs, the leader will need to review and update the position information to form a new job description. It will need to have a position details, a overview, a key functions, the responsibilities and the required qualification. It is important to identify the purpose of hiring before advertising the job so that the duties can be better and specifically described to narrow down the target applicants. Where to advertise? Frequently used advertisement providers, which includes the local newspapers or websites or recruitment consultants, school magazines and educational institution career events, etc. The factors need to be considered when putting out the advertisement for the positions or the cost, the targeted audience of the chosen advertising method, and the advertisement should be very precise and specific in order to attract the desired applicants. Managing inquiries and applications after advertising the services will receive inquiries about more details of the positions, since the advertisement can only offer a limited information. The leader should be able to provide the application information kits to applicants. When receiving the applications and resumes, a selection of file or folder should be established for the upcoming selection process. This is about the job advertising and hiring procedures. After advertising, the next step is interviewing. Interviews provide the insight into the candidates that cannot be assessed from a written application or resumes. The person or a group responsible for staffing will decide who will interview the candidates and must develop the plans for the interviews. Appointments are made for the most promising candidates. Those meetings all the requirements listed in the job specifications. The committee meets the interviewing the candidates. Here the main objective of the interview is to get the applicant to talk about the previous experiences, to know about the knowledge of the job at hand, and to know the teacher's knowledge of philosophy of disciplining the children and organizing the classrooms. As a part of interview, some hypothetical situations appropriate to the job can be posed. Determining the selection criteria. After the job advertising and the interview method, then comes the selection criteria. Selection criteria or list of statements which characterize the skills, knowledge required for successfully undertaking the role. It should complement the job description and also inform the applicants about what is expected of them. The selection criteria should use the strengths-based approach, which encourages the applicant to consider the skills and knowledges and form a performance-based perspective and to respond using examples of practice. For example, the selection criteria may state that the applicant creates a plan to meet the individual needs of the children and families, engage in a professional development opportunities, or applies for a training outcomes to daily practices. Next is on-job orientation. The director or the leader is responsible for orienting the new employee. A tour of the building, introduction to all the other staff members either during the tour or in a staff meeting, and shortly thereafter essential to the orientation procedure. The new employee also should be introduced to the parents of the children at the earliest possible time. Sometimes the director notifies the parents about this new staff additions or changes by mail. Others use their bulletin boards or newspapers, and still others introduce the new member informally as and when the occasion arises or at regular scheduled meetings. The new person or the new staff will need to know where to find the workspace, what are the storage facilities and materials available in the early education center, and what schedule is to be followed. This is about the selection criteria and job orientation of the new staff. After understanding the importance of personal management in early childhood education centers and the job responsibilities and how a hiring of the staff takes place in early childhood education centers, let us now move on to see the staff supervision. The director is responsible for supervision of the staff and of the classrooms by observations, conferences with the staff, the director gives support and guidance to each staff member and establishes a trusting relationship with each other. This trust and mutual respect that develops provide a basis for providing the teaching-learning relationship that parallels the relationship between the adult and the child. The supervisor is capable to create a favorable environment in which each staff member can gain a new understanding of the self and also of the center's program. Principles. A number of basic principles or assumptions should be kept in mind as you think about the director as a staff supervisor. The same principles apply to the supervisory role whether you are working with a new or inexperienced class staff member or a mature or fully qualified teacher. Supervision is a dynamic evolutionary process that is based on trust. Supervision is individualized and adapted to the personality and teaching style of each staff member. Supervision provides a support system for each staff member. Supervision provides a framework within which the supervisor demonstrates the professional skills of the entire staff. Then comes the staff training. The staff training programs begins with the orientation of new staff members and includes all the aspects of in-services and on-job training. Planning the total staff training program depends on the composition of the center. Fully trained and qualified classroom teaching staff members should have the basic child development information and should be able to plan the curriculum and classroom management strategies with minimum or sometimes additional training. However, they may need a special help with the parents' conferences and also on home visits that they will surely profit from any in-service training programs that updates their knowledge on early childhood education. Let us see what is the in-service training for the new staff members. In-service training is an enrichment program and is made available to the staff members for enhancing their skills and broadening their knowledge of the early childhood education. The director is responsible for planning and implementation of the training programs after considering the staff needs and the center's program. The time and place of training. A suitable time and also a place for conducting these kind of training programs are to be planned basing on the staff duties and commitments. The next is method employed in in-service training. The method or strategies employed in the in-service training program will be depending on the amount of time available, the resources available and the content of the program selected. The group discussion led by the director would be an appropriate method to use in making the staff members more aware of the safety issues in the center. Next is the in-service program training content. The training needs will differ basing on the earlier training and experience of the staff. The teacher should also be given training to deal with the children and the behavioral problems and sometimes the special needs of the child also. The director should determine if the staff members need any kind of special coaching in conducting an intake interviews or home visits or parental conferences. Next is the on-job training. Although the terms in-service training and on-job training are sometimes can be used interchangeably, they have somewhat different meanings. While the in-service training applies to enrichment program, on-job training implies hiring untrained staff members and then providing the actual job training opportunities while the staff member is employed. The training not only makes the new staff member employable in other similar centers, but also it increases the possibility of the employee to move up in their career ladders in their organization. The on-job training is a planned program of comprehensive instructions that include basic learning experiences and regularly scheduled classes or meetings. This is about the job training programs. After having understood the personal management in early childhood education centers and how the staff is selected, hired and trained in the early education centers, let us now move on to see the enrolling of children. Filling out the forms, interviewing the parents, visiting their homes for the background or the major components of the enrollment procedure. The director is responsible for developing the forms that will provide the school staff members with the information they need about the families and the children. The director also manages the timing and planning of these procedures. However, it is useful to discuss the plan with the staff members who will be required to carry out them. Information on families and children. The director must decide the kind of information to be obtained from the family. It should be given to a staff member who is responsible for taking care of the child. Next is the forms. The list of the pre-enrollment information that has to be typically obtained from the child and the family. Noting all the information necessary is the efficient business operation of the center. The health and safety of the child, for the better understanding of the child and the family, this information is very important and crucial. The information regarding the name of the child, including the nickname of the child, the name of the family members with the age of the siblings also, naming the members of their household and their relationship to the child. And the another important information that is required while enrolling the children is about the home address and the telephone number, the name, address, telephone number of the employer of the parents, and the transportation plans for the child, like whether the child will be transported through a vehicle or by the parents themselves, and by whom the child will be dropped at the center. Next comes the arrangement for payment of the fees. And then another important information that has to be collected while enrolling of the children is the medical history and the record of the recent physical examination of the child by a physician. And then information is also required to be collected on the social history of the child. The name, addresses, telephone numbers of the child's physician or clinic is also required, and the name, address, telephone numbers of the person to be contacted in case of any emergencies is also required to be filled up in the form. Permission to participate in the total school program like the field trips or any research taking place in the center should also be taken. Next comes the intake procedures. The director decides which staff member will be involved in each step of the intake procedures, but it is imperative that the child's teacher is actively involved from the beginning. The adult who is working directly with the child must interact with the child and the family to establish the feeling of mutual trust among the child and the family and the teacher. Initial interviews with the parents. The purpose of an initial interview is to get acquainted with the parents, answer their questions about the center's program and communicate what will be expected of them. Familiarize them with the forms that has to be filled in before the child gets enrolled. The last one is the home visit with the family. A home visit is the last step in intake procedure. The director and the teacher or whoever is working with the child should describe the purpose of the visit and go over for the reporting before taking the family's appointment. Home visit gives the teacher a chance to get acquainted with the child and also the home surroundings. The visit will provide an important chance to chat informally with the parents before the child enters the school. Observing a family at home will help the teacher in understanding the family life cycle and the family attitudes towards the child. So, today we have learnt that personal management in early childhood education programs. We have seen how important the teachers or the persons in a early childhood education programs. We have understood the job responsibilities of the director in recruiting the staff members in early childhood education programs. We have understood the steps and procedures to be followed, like how the advertisement should be given and what are the interview basis and how the selection criteria takes place in early childhood education programs. And then we went on to understand, after the staff has been recruited, how the in-job training program is given for the newly recruited staff members. And also we have seen what are the procedures that has to be followed for enrolling the child. We have also seen what are the information that has to be collected before the child gets enrolled in the early childhood education programs. Hope you have understood the lesson. Thank you.